performance is a team sport. We need other human beings to unlock us. And so letting go of this kind of, I know all the answers. Yeah, that's a good lifestyle business, but it's not necessarily venture scalable, right?
Totally.
But I think there's a lot of, irrational fear, guilt or shame around not being able to be the one that does everything to affect an outcome. But that's far from the reality, right? Which is, we're social creatures. We need one another. We all mirrors of aspects of the same brilliance that exist in all,
Did you see the report from Accenture that said that toxic workplace behavior is costing the world, so organizationally, globally, $3.07 trillion?
It turns out there's an ROI to being somewhat humane. I am Jon Low. My definition of belonging is you can be, do, and have anything you want without any threat to the integrity of who you are.
Jon, hello. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you, Rajkumari. Such a pleasure to be here.
Oh my God, it's such an honor to have you here.
Thank you for the invitation.
Oh my gosh. It is so good to have you. You are the founder of Polaris Alpha. You have actually helped founders raise close to $850 million and get funding for their ventures. You are a performance coach. You are a tactical advisor. You have been doing this for a long time. So I love that you say that human excellence is innate. I fully agree with that. You also say that there's a brilliance in every human if you care to look closely enough. That is beautiful because that applies to everything in life, right? Whether you look at the petals of a flower or the paws of an animal, right? If we look closely enough, there's brilliance to that.
Yeah. Wow. I didn't know I said that, by the way. It does sound good. Thank you. I think maybe I have appreciation for it since, growing up, I did have a learning difficulty. I was an immigrant from Malaysia, and I had a challenge adopting the English language, which led to what I would say both social and learning inhibitions, so to speak, right? If you don't speak the native language, it's hard to learn what the teacher's teaching because that teacher is not teaching it to you telepathically like a dolphin. There's no echolocation in humans yet. And
I love the yet part. That's great.
Yet. Hey, we're in the Bay Area. Anything's possible, right? But innately, there's something in my soul or in the core of my being that knew that my capacity to express more capabilities or excellence in context of my life, and there was this gnawing sense that capability is there. I just didn't know how to unlock it,
Wow.
And so I suppose it set me on this path of appreciating that, as I was unlocking the puzzles for myself, discovering, where my talents lie, where my passions lie, where my capacities could be expressed or explored more, I started to appreciate that I can't be the only person experiencing this. And I'm not. We hear many wonderful stories of human triumph despite their despite the constraints of their situation. And then, in our profession, it's kind of a Hippocratic oath, right? That anything's possible for humans.
Yeah.
Or else we won't look for the potential catalysts or answers that enable that. If we don't presuppose the excellence of humans, then we stop looking for the magic that we believe can be there.
I want to slow this down. Can you just say that one more time for everyone to hear that again? If we don't presuppose the magic.
Yeah. If we don't presuppose the magic and human potential, then we're never going to ask the questions. We're never going to keep an open mind to potentially learn something beyond your expectations.
That's beautiful.
When something occurs to you or you learn something beyond your expectations, that's where I think exponential outcomes lie.
How do you translate all of that into your clients? Because they're founders, they're in the process of raising, funding, they're in the process of trying to build a company. and get approval from the board, and right, and how do you say release expectations and go in the flow and feel the magic?
Oh, yeah. That is one way to never have a client again in my profession, right?
There you go.
There's one way to never have a client again, or actually to lose a client, is if I start speaking about some of the things like that. So I think you got to respect the context and the nature of the individual you're working with. Yeah. And I have my baseline languages and my interests, but I set aside my biases of how I want to communicate versus how I need to communicate to be effective for that person in that context, with predetermined criteria for what success and not success is, right? So part of a lot of early stage founders is they're navigating a lot of uncertainty. They're trying to secure more capital. They're trying to de-risk co-founder risk, which is basically people-based risk. And so then I always try and bring my kind of engineering, entrepreneur, company building background or business development, all the skill sets of my professions in the past. I try and bring that to a foreground in a frame and identify what frame or scaffold of thinking would be helpful for this individual now to increase the probability of success along the vectors that are predefined to be vectors of success, right?
I love that.
Which also means sometimes, a lot of times it's tactical and mental games. It's a lot of soundboarding and mental sparring. Other times, it involves a more softer aspect of the human experience, which is dealing with difficult emotions that come up or we know are in the way based on our training. And we can see that it's is a patterned blocker to progress.
Yeah.
Then we press on that pressure point.
You mentioned that there are three main blockers.
Yes.
Irrational fear, irrational guilt, and irrational shame.
Yes.
First of all, I want to ask, why are you using the word irrational? And then I want to ask,
irrational.
Can you talk about each of these and what themes you've seen from founders trying to navigate?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not uncommon let's just talk about irrational fear and what I mean by irrational fear. So irrational fear is very simple to understand. We've all heard maybe a version of this metaphor where you're watching a scary movie or a car about to hit you from the screen on the television, or Jaws, whatever, and your heart rate elevates, your fear centers fire off, yeah, but you're not actually in a context where the threat to your life is real. You're not in the ocean with a shark. You're not on the road. You're probably on a comfy theater couch that feels similar to this, eating popcorn and sipping soda. That's actually far from you're gonna die, although if you consume too much corn syrup, that might be true. So it's irrational because it's not firing off in a functional way in that context.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're crossing a busy highway, it is appropriate for you to have those fear centers fire up because there's a real threat, depending on where you are, that someone could hit you. So that's actually contextually appropriate. You should have that fight-flight response so that you can respond to variables that could affect your physical safety. And I always think back to also, and there's different types of fear, right? I used to compete at a high level in Taekwondo in the ring, and I would say that you're deliberately putting yourself in a situation where there's irrational fear, and you're trying to de-risk it through training and experience. And that fear is different because it doesn't occur so much in business, I don't think. But I think my appreciation for it gives me an enriched point of view when I work with people's fears. Is I've been in a vulnerable situation where a trained opponent, you can tell they're so dangerous because every cell in your body is screaming when you get in the ring. Your adrenaline's heightened, and every cell is telling you, this person could crush you. And And funnily enough, his cellular structure or your opponent's cellular structure is probably screaming off the same. That's one of the things I learned, is that we're, myself and the opponent, we're just both scared little boys figuring out how to be in the world.
Yeah.
And actually that helped me win a lot, but we'll put that in a parking lot. So so basically in startups, what I think is, if you are overly indexed on fears that are irrational, your more intelligent functional brain centers don't operate as well. Yeah. And maybe you can enrich this with your knowledge, but the prefrontal cortex, the executive center, holds so much more capacity for intelligent functional decision making, whether it's personal, interpersonal, financial, whatever. And so what we're trying to do is go, hey, are you actually gonna die? No. So let's take a breath, regather, let's bring this online. And more often than not, the client has the innate potential to solve a lot of their own problems if we help them make a state change.
Explain what that is.
A state change is one from fear-based, which is, I'm always computing that whether I'm going to die or not, right? Truth is, you're not, right? And then when they recognize the rationality of their fear response, there often is a parasympathetic reset, which it goes, yeah?
Beautiful. Yeah.
And that is a good physiological marker, in my opinion, for a state change. My experience is, you can try this on yourself. You can even force the breath and notice that there is actually a state change. Because more often than not, in fear state, you're either holding your breath or your breath is shallow.
Yeah.
And you don't realize that your level of oxygenation's gone down, which has a negative or adverse impact to making effective decisions.
So what you're advocating for is more breathing for better decision making.
Yeah, there should be a study for that, actually.
Well, there's probably a lot of studies for that.
Yeah.
But what puts people in their zone of genius? You talk about the zone of genius. What's that?
Yeah. So
and how do I get there?
So I think it's different. I think let's be sure the way I define zone of genius within this context of company building is, I want to understand a few things. I want to understand how they respond to fear and how they respond to opportunity and what gets them excited. So I call these motivational vectors, motivational criteria. So what lights them up? And for everyone, that can show up in different ways. So I like to ask the question, and you'll be familiar with the question, is what, hey Rajkumari, what is important to you about your work? I love to ask that question. And then maybe,
I love that question.
Right. But maybe not you, but someone else, if I ask them a sample answer, and the audience can probably ask this themselves, but what's important to you about your work? Let's just take the first answer you give. And someone might say, look, I want to make something that's actually useful and people value it. Great. That sounds wonderful. I have no idea what the hell that means.
Totally.
Is that, colored water? Is it kombucha?
I love it.
Yeah. But it doesn't matter that we know what that means or not. Because the second question is more important. So when you are, in this particular example, creating something that's useful to people that they value, yeah, how will you know that criteria is fulfilled?
That's great.
And I
love what you're doing here. You're actually going through the outcome frames, but keep going. This is
absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely. And so one of the things I like to do then is understand, and this is how human systems work. And actually it was codified in my training, but I understood it in Taekwondo because there's so much sensory data. And to make objective decisions in playing the game or sparring in the ring, you don't want stories in the way of decision making. So I always want to distill.
Love that.
What sensory data, and is it digital data? Is it analog data? What sensory data visual, eyes, smell, maybe hearing, normally visual hearing, like tasting, touching, feeling, fulfills your criteria.
Jon, this is brilliant. You have taken, forgive everyone who is so pro NLP, boring ass NLP language, and you have translated it into a language that is so engaging and speaks to founders exactly where they are. This is your zone of genius.
I think so, and hopefully
This is great.
Hopefully continues to evolve in a positive direction. Yeah.
Please continue. This is fantastic.
No, yeah. So there's two subsets, right? So the sensory data. So they might say that they need to see a dashboard with metrics, which is revenue retention, utilization, NPS, whatever. Great. So now I know that there's a visual stimulus, and it's digital information.
This is incredible.
Words and numbers. For another individual, it might be, I need to hear the stories from customers. Well, you better keep speaking to your customers. Yeah. That's analog information, right? It's a combo of analog, right? Because you're hearing words, that's digital as well. So I want to understand, what are these sensory channel biases for fulfilling their criteria? Because everyone does it differently. And so for the CEO who needs, most CEOs, actually, a lot of them need the dashboard with metrics. Actually, those ones get, in my experience in this context, get a better rich representation of tracking truth and progress that way. It's not the full picture, obviously. You don't want to over-index on that because then you forget about the people piece. But what it does is it helps me understand, okay, have you got that dashboard? Oh, you don't? Why not? Because we know it's a success enabler for you.
So now we're hitting up against a limiting belief. That's genius.
Yeah, it could be a limiting belief, or it could be that it's a blind spot. They weren't aware of how to. Spot. If they weren't aware of their own little like performance manual, like, oh look, there's a button here that you can press, that that can light you up on fire. And so when they get that, typically what happens is the anxiety or a lack of confidence and uncertainty goes away because that criteria is fulfilled.
Oh wow!
Right. So it's like, oh, great, your CEOs or your co-founders working on this.
So you're saying that once I get the dashboard, I might actually get the data that I want.
Yeah.
And now I'm actually losing my confidence because I fulfilled that measurement.
Oh, not necessarily. No, you're gaining confidence because now you understand that it's a success enabler for you. But maybe you weren't aware before to actually prioritize creating this the reporting system or the SaaS stack or the organizational ritual around reporting progress.
Got it.
And that can be a huge enabler, right? And for the other person who maybe indexes on seeing smiling faces of their customers and hearing their stories, well, and I think a combination of both in this context is useful for CEOs. I think neither one is the better one in its absolute form. I think developing flexibility around that's helpful. But then for this latter person that indexes more on analog information through the visual and auditory senses, I might suggest that why don't you set an input metric for checking in with your customers regularly. And at the earliest stages, they're going to do that a lot because they're very product centric. As the company scales where they've got 30 to 50 people, it can be easy to stay not as close to those customer conversations. And there's various reasons for that. Some people might think, oh, it's weird that why is the CEO speaking to me? I'm just like using his software. But for this particular example, that person's success enabler needs a bit of that. Yeah.
Interesting. What are some green flags? What are some red flags that you start to witness in founders where you can see that they're going off the rails or they're staying on the course?
Oh gosh. So this is very specific in this context. Yeah. So there's some red flags. One of our roles is we're always tracking patterns of behavior, correct? And those patterns of behavior can be functional for the context or can be dysfunctional. So like if you want to take care, for example, a functional pattern of behavior, if your outcome is to have good clean teeth and a reduced dental bill, you probably want to brush and floss every night. Yeah. But if a dysfunctional pattern of behavior might be you want perfect teeth and you want to reduce your dental bills, but every night
get Invisalign.
Yeah.
No, just kidding.
But every night you decide I'm going to eat that Hershey's bar. My pattern of behavior is I'm going to eat a Hershey bar at like 7 p.m. every night and just rinse my mouth, right, with water. So
this is so interesting.
So we're like, okay, so there's a dysfunctional pattern of behavior.
Yeah.
It might be functional in another context, but not this, right? One of the red flags I see is if you run away from truth seeking. And what I mean by truth seeking is the difficult news, right? Like, hey, you don't actually have product to market fit, or your metrics aren't good enough to go fundraise right now, right? So I want to see whether over time, the capacity to run towards seeing the hard things, whether the capacity to run towards seeing the hard things increases.
And whether they're willing to pivot.
Correct.
To make an adjustment.
Right. And so then if they are, then that's a green flag, right?
Right.
If they aren't, then what you'll see is a lot of denial behavior, right? Or an over-indexing on, if you don't have PMF, overspending on sales and marketing, for example.
What's
right?
PMF?
Product to market fit. So if you don't have a product the market's already pulling for and wants, and there's some sort of virality or a pull from the market, great, let's look there. What's up, right? Versus, and so the irrational response would be like overspending on sales and marketing, which helps to a degree with acquisition, but it doesn't lead to retention. And I'm speaking so generally, right? Because it's such a much more nuanced and complex environment. So, and I'm using a very specific example. So that's one of the biggest red flags at this stage. The other red flag is less on this tactical scientific track, which I would consider somewhat left brain. The other red flag is the right brain. The other red flag is when I hear a founder say that something's too touchy-feely, or they have a blind spot around the tactical importance of working with human emotion. And that blind spot shows up as people, I think like this, so other people should think like this, which is not true. And so I don't think that's the other red flag. They might not realize that, hey, small words repeated over time, such as, thanks for your contribution, I understand that you're working very hard for the company.
So it's interesting. I'm in the midst of writing an article right now with Fast Company, and we just submitted it today to get published. And performance appreciation is a term that I just coined in this article. And I think you're talking about performance appreciation, is how do we start to appreciate the little things that result in a neurochemical engagement that generates revenue 10 times.
Right.
And that's the performance piece you're talking about.
That is a performance piece. And so that's a red flag for me, because if I hear someone saying that,
it's a red flag if they're not interested in supporting that.
Right. And I've seen it way too many times where high-performing executives who need a bit of that, who don't get it, I'm like, I'm pretty sure you're at risk of some churn here.
Right now.
And it happens.
Totally.
And I'm not talking about, hey, just faking performance feedback. I'm not saying if someone does something terrible, that's separate.
For sure.
But if they are a performer and they're critical to your business, these little things go a long way,
Did you see the article from Accenture's, the report from Accenture that said that toxic workplace behavior is costing the world, so organizationally, globally, $3.07 trillion? And that what you're saying is basically being able to stand in a leadership position that is masterful in doing performance appreciation will start to turn those moments of relationship into actual dollars. It
turns out there's an ROI to being somewhat humane.
It turns out that there is ROI to being somewhat human. So what I'd love to do now is shift into the scenarios. We have some real situations that I've actually worked with clients. And I'd love to hear your thoughts, your perspicacity, your advice, things that you would actually share with clients at the moment that they would ask you these questions.
Let's do it.
So I'm going to read them to you.
Please.
And I would love for you to just pretend that I'm a founder coming into you like rah, 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 and you're just gonna throw your magic at me.
Okay.
You ready, Jon?
Okay. Let's role play.
Okay, here we go. So first one. This is a leadership development and executive CEO stance. So I'm coming in as a new CEO. I am struggling to balance empathy with authority while leading through rapid growth. Can you provide strategies to enhance my executive presence and effectively inspire trust and performance in my team?
Gosh, there's so much there to unpack. I have 1,000,000,001 questions, and I think the questions matter more than the answers.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the question is, the first thing was executive presence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What specifically do you mean about executive presence? Like, what lets you know your presence is the way you're currently evaluating it, and how will I validate that in a way that I could almost film a movie script? I need behaviorally specific descriptions for your current executive presence that you're dissatisfied with. Presuppose that, right? Because you want to change that.
I love this.
And then I go, okay, what executive presence would you like to have? And how do I confirm that at a sensory level, right?
Great.
And then I go, okay, then in the back of my mind, I'm like, thank you for the information, but I'm also asking a bunch of questions at the back of my mind. So this is not just questions to the coaching client. Is at the back of my mind, I'm asking, okay, are those behaviors this client is describing around the desired executive present, is it functional for the context? Is that what's really needed, or is there a belief that that's needed? So I want to assess whether that effort is actually going to move the needle or not. So then I have a bunch of other questions, right? What was the other components?
Trust and performance in my team.
Okay, trust and performance. Okay.
How can I inspire effectively?
Yeah. So inspire is a key word, right? Because, it's you want to inspire because that triggers intrinsic motivation to perform. Yeah. And what does trust specifically mean? How will you know you're trusting? And what does performance mean? Then I'm trying to ask, what is the evidence that you will have succeeded here? Yeah. And what level what level of performance is your team at right now? What level of trust are you at now?
What's the baseline? Where do you want to go?
Yeah.
What's the delta that you want to achieve?
And in many cases, it might be, I haven't thought about what the state of affairs is now. Well, let's try and create a frame around evaluating that. Because, it's all good to have because I also want to ask, does the CEO have a motivational toward, like a future-oriented bias where they can see point B, but they ignore establishing point A so that people can join the dots? So maybe what's missing is no one actually has the reality check on what the present state of affairs is and what point A is. So there's so much there. So I have all these questions firing off.
This is a great starting point. This is fantastic. And what I'm loving, for those of you who are familiar with NLP, I love how you're disguising all of the NLP language behind founder language. I mean, it's kind of genius. I really am enjoying this. I love it so much.
Yeah. And
like we use in NLP, we use current state, desired state. And, in this case, we're like, baseline and, I don't remember what you actually used.
I don't even know what I said.
Yeah, something else. But
you make a good point. And I think because frankly, unless you have the passion, I don't think sitting through boring NLP courses is probably going to be, that has very limited entertainment value. But if you have a good trajectory on the toolkit and how it can augment your efforts, it is one of the best meta learning toolkits in the universe.
100%.
Because it will fine tune your acuity with your consciousness.
And it'll also bring you into a very embodied state of sensing into the other person. Yeah,
you just have to go through a very painful journey of learning it. Which, amen, we
did.
Have.
Mine was 5 years. Mine was a really long ass. It was 3+, but it was really long. Okay, scenario number 2. You ready?
Scenario number 2. Let's fire.
Okay, this is a go-to-market scenario. We're about to launch a new product, and I'm unsure how to best identify and target key customer segments. while coordinating our cross-functional teams? How do I develop a go-to market plan that will accelerate our market penetration?
Gosh, so many questions. I'm like, so what assumptions underpin your decision to have built the thing before going to market with it?
Damn.
That's one thing I'm asking at this phase.
Damn. I'm processing all my founder experience through these questions right now, and it's so not pretty.
Too close.
Very, very close.
So as you can tell, a lot of the questioning is understanding the what I would call the landscape of presuppositions, assumptions, and beliefs behind the decision making.
Yes.
And it also colors the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things in this case, I'm also going like, I'm inspecting what means do you believe have to be covered to achieve a certain ends? And is there a better way to achieve the ends without the same means? And what I mean by that is, human beings, we all do this, where we confuse an outcome, we confuse a process with an outcome. I want to have more love in my life. Maybe the outcome is I want a loving relationship that I feel safe and secure to be authentically be myself and have a functional flow of give and take in the relationship that builds over time and flourishes.
How do you know?
Right. So in this case, the outcome is I want a loving relationship, and then you might have confused the means to be I have to build this successful financial empire and create some sort of financial stability before going for that. Yeah. And I want to understand, is that means the only way to the outcome?
I feel like this conversation is turning out to be a personal coaching session. And I'm not enjoying it, and yet I am learning so much about my journey to this point in my life. I may have done that. I may have done exactly what you just described.
I've done it in some shape or form in my life too. So perhaps, perhaps then the takeaway is we're all just as humans as one another.
Oh my God. The universality of humanity.
Yeah. And the truth is we do this all the time in business. So we think we might have to build something before going to market. And the presupposition belief might be, I don't want to defraud people, lie, and feel like a scammer.
Yeah.
But then these are chicken and egg problems, right? Why can't it be both? Can't you go to market while building your product? And can't you establish trust with customers to help you iterate and improve it out of the promise of future value, and that you're going to invest more in the equity of the relationship along the way and value them eternally?
I love it. For those in the audience, John and I have been so excited about meeting each other, and we have gotten inspired to actually co-create, co-author, and co-design a few things. So as you're talking, I'm just like, I can't wait to
so many
sit
ideas.
down and start to actually, put something together and offer it to the public. It's going to be really exciting.
Thank you. And I just want to add that in this particular thing, maybe we can actually add this in a curriculum somewhere, but it's a human bias.
Yeah.
But the difference, the delta that it makes when you reveal these assumptions and reveal better pathways or more higher probability of success, low resource constraint pathways is two things. You're going to burn less money to get there.
Sure.
Right? So there's a way to measure the ROI there. And it doesn't always have to be big things. It can be small things like, oh, why aren't you calling that person? Why are you jumping 2 hoops through other relationships when you should just go direct?
That.
Right?
All day long. And that's an invitation in such a huge way to really explore, why are you jumping 2 hoops?
Exactly. And a lot of what we're talking about for the audience, it seems so obvious when you hear someone else talk through it and you reflect, oh, I could ask these questions of others.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's, I think, beautiful about our profession is, the people we work with, the executives and founders we work with, don't lack the intellectual capacity to ask these questions that we're asking. I wouldn't say. But it's a team sport. Performance is a team sport. We need other human beings to unlock us.
Yeah.
I have, we work with people. You and I work with other people to help us see what we don't. as much as we help others see what they don't. And so letting go of this kind of, the other red flag is I know all the answers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's a good lifestyle business, but it's not necessarily venture scalable, right?
Totally.
But I think there's a lot of, irrational fear, guilt, or shame around not being able to be the one that does everything to affect an outcome. But that's far from the reality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is, we're social creatures. We need one another. We all mirrors of aspects of the same brilliance that exist in all,
Speaking of not seeing what is right in front of us, for those of you who are watching this episode, I have shifted my legs thrice, and Jon has followed that cadence each and every time. So we are mirroring each other yet again, and I don't even know if you noticed that, but this is a very, very core technique to create safety in NLP. So I think that's hilarious. Okay, Jon, you ready for another scenario?
Let's go.
You're acing these. You are absolutely acing these. These are amazing. Okay, we're working with team performance and accountability. So that's kind of dovetailing into what you just kind of talked about here. I'm noticing a decline in my team's performance and accountability and need help setting clear expectations while implementing effective performance metrics. What can I do to foster a culture of ownership and re-energize my team?
So much there. So much questions. Well, let's start with the ownership. Yeah. Is it appropriate to expect them to work as hard as you if you own 85% of the company and you've given them like bips that divest over 3 to 5 years? So you have to. So I'm always trying to adjust for what is a realistic expectation here.
Great.
And if you haven't set that up front, it might be a good time to reset that now, would it not? To see whether this person still wants to be here. Yeah. And that's the hard truth, right? Which is, one of the biases is that I'm searching for, especially in this context, is, hey, if you expect someone to work as hard or be bought in to your company and vision as you are, what incentive structure have you created to affect that outcome, right? And it could be a few things. It could be financial equity. It could be hard, like intrinsic criteria, motivational criteria. Does this person have a personal story around the mission and the value or problem you're solving that makes them just fired up to do it anyway, right? So when I think about ownership, I think about ownership and accountability. I think about the incentive structure. And then I think about, performance and accountability is like, well, what outcome are they going for? How do they fit in the picture? How do they know? And how do you think they know? Is it because you emailed it or sent it on a Notion page and expected everyone to read it every day, like a religious doctrine? Or have you, do you presuppose if you've said it once, you shouldn't have to say it again because it's written down? Sure, that's fine. That's a fair expectation, maybe for your senior executives or someone at the C-suite. But at every step down, you have to repeat these things, right? So I'm looking for, hey, what behaviors have you owned in maximizing the probability of greater team performance and accountability?
Nice.
And then accountability, I'm asking multiple questions. It's like, what do you want them specifically to be accountable about? Yeah. And does it matter? Is it the most important thing? And is it of high urgency that you need more of a top-down approach to accountability? Like the outcome? I'm always thinking about the outcome. Is it mid-level kind of urgency that pays off in the long tail, not the short tail, right? Where you need a more collaborative across decision-making process, not consensus, but where you set forward an idea and you want input, feedback, and challenge to develop it? Or do you want more of a bottoms up where you have the luxury to ask people, hey, how do you think we should solve this? And then develop it there. And it's all context specific, right? Because if everyone got hit by everyone who was hit by the SVB bank run, you don't have time for the bottoms up.
Totally.
Yeah. So I
remember you do not.
Right?
Oh my God, it was such a stressful weekend. And I was not even impacted.
So for context for listeners who didn't know, a lot of startups banked with Silicon Valley Bank, no surprise. And when the bank went under, a lot of them were stressed about how they were going to meet the next payroll to take care of the employees.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, to their credit, the main thought was, I want to make sure I can meet payroll for my employees and take care of them. Right?
Yeah.
Which was lovely. It brought the best of humanity, but that is not a scenario or context where you can afford to do bottoms-up decision making.
Correct.
Hey, everyone, guess what? Here's a problem I want your bottoms-up approach to solve.
No, there
Any
were a lot
feedback, you guys won't get paid on Monday. Like that's not context appropriate.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of questions. You can tell there's a through line here.
Yeah.
Context, and a lot of people talk about context, but they don't understand. If I ask 5 people, hey, what specifically does context mean?
That's
they wouldn't have defined
question.
it. I say, context is a ecosystem that has presupposed variables for what success and not success is. And so context is any information within a closed system that can affect the success of the outcome.
That's the definition of reality.
That's it.
That's hilarious, because I was just talking about local and non-local in the quantum world, and the definition of reality is exactly what is in the environment that can impact and affect the outcome of the circumstance. Yeah.
Right. And so in this case, I'm always asking, well, okay, so what is the outcome and what information impacts it, right? There's just so many, every time a founder has a question or a scenario, I'm more likely to fire off 1 billion questions internally and a few questions externally to fish for the landscape behind this reality they've created.
It's so fascinating.
And I don't say that explicitly because
of course.
But it's an art form, and I think I'm just obsessed with the art form.
You are masterful at this art form, and now I understand how you were able to raise $825 million for your clients. Right. That's kind of impressive.
Again, that's just a credibility point, right? I in full credit, the founders did most of the work, and I'm just glad to be a positive, effective variable in the mix.
All Olympic gold medal winners have coaches, Jon.
Wow. You see what you did there? You're coaching me now, Rajkumari. That reframe landed deep. Deep.
Good. Last one.
Okay.
You up for one more?
Yeah. Is this a kicker?
I think so, actually. This is about strategic and team communication.
Ooh. I love these buzzwords, by the way. They mean a lot to me.
I know. For you. You can thank Mike for that. Managing a distributed team has made effective communication challenging. And I'm struggling to ensure consistent messaging and goal alignment. This is actually directly from Rajkumari. Oh, wait, was that my outside voice? Can you provide strategies to enhance our communication and keep the team cohesive and productive? I don't know if my producer has eyes into my team at work, but I think he took directly out of my brain. Anyway, please.
This is an ongoing topic for exploration. I have so many more questions than answers, but track observations. When I hear that, I think, okay, like what's working and what's not. I want to know what rituals or practices are working and what's not, right? And how do you know they're working or not, right? Evidence again. We just never want to assume. And then then behind that, we're like, okay, in what ways are you trying to replicate in person online, and is it working? And in what ways are you trying to replicate in person with, remote asynchronous communications, where you're trying to force like a square into a circle and kind of busting that assumption, right?
I love that.
And one thing I always like to go back to are first principles. How do people align? How do people communicate effectively when they do, right? And there's so many vectors of that, right? There's who are your champions of cross-functional communication besides you? Because you can't be the solo blocker for everything. If you're the only mic that gives answers, then you don't scale, right? So who else is responsible for being that, and who else can be?
I love that.
Right?
I love that.
And and then the other thing is, do you have collaborative workers, or people who are more individual contributors? You need a combination of both for any business.
100%.
Right? And so then I think going back to X Factor or Zone of Genius, someone who works well and their genius activates in collaboration, which is vicinity of other human beings they can soundboard off, or just the fact that their body consciousness can feel the vicinity of another human. then you need to create accommodations where they can maybe go to WeWork or share workspace to get that, because they might not need that necessarily from people in the company themselves. And then the individual contributor, well, what meetings don't they need to be there for? When do they get their cave time? Yeah, they
cave time.
Yeah, their cave time or
Oh my
their
God, I
pod
love
time.
that.
Yeah,
I need permanent cave time. I need cave time that lasts several years in a
Cave
row.
time.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
While I get paid full time.
Right. And so I want to understand, I'm always asking these questions like, hey, how do you find out at scale with a system or approach to figure out what blocks or enables employees? And then for communication is repeat yourself more than you like, repeat yourself more than you like in mixed media. And, never, and here's, I think one red flag for me is when people over-index too much on not having any meetings at all. Yeah, I think there's this ongoing debate.
What company is that?
Well, I got this ongoing debate of like reducing meetings like it's like a religious task, like meetings are a waste of time, blah, 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 blah.
But they're not.
They're not necessarily. I think it's helpful to have clear agendas and kind of protocols around what a productive meeting is. But have you built in kind of, and maybe you don't need to be there as a C-suite or executive, but have you built in rituals where people can come together, right?
That's my point.
Yeah. Because psych safety, I mean, we talk about psychological safety so much that it's almost become, for me, like a dull tone. I always think, okay, are you aware that someone who doesn't feel like they're being eaten by a tiger is probably going to be better at doing their job than someone who's typing on a Google Doc and has this emotional experience that they're the prey. Yeah. I mean, you could argue that, someone could say, show me the data, right? I could probably ask Rajkumari, you'll show me the data. I'm like, I don't got the time for that. This is just basics of being human. And so I think you need rituals around how do they generate that belonging, right? The thing about trust and belonging, and when people gather together, the magic about that, there's an osmosis of information that's transferred. So if you're clear on your message, have you created a field of osmosis or system of osmosis and belonging so that message can be received to the masses and self-sustained through the individuals?
I want to slow all of this down. You're saying so many things, and I'm trying to jump in here, but to your osmosis point, there is actual neuroscience to that. The Heart Math Institute has done ridiculous amounts of research about being able to pick up data from the field through the electromagnetic field around the heart. So that alone is true.
So I can say this is evidence-based assertions.
100%.
Oh my goodness. I'm so data-driven.
100%. And the second thing is, we always ask during performance evaluations what's working and not working. I want to ask the audience, when was the last time that you asked in your friendships what's working and what's not working? Like, seriously.
That's a very good point. That's a very good
point.
point.
I mean, I do that at work all the time, with my team. And I certainly do it in my partnership now that I have one. But I've never done it with my friends. So maybe I should forewarn my producer as an upcoming conversation topic about what's working and what's not.
He deserves that.
At the very least.
Yeah,
he deserves a lot more than that.
You bring up an interesting point, because I think maybe we've talked about this before. I would argue that for most people, the work environment is one of the most intimate settings they'll spend their lives on.
Yes, absolutely.
But it is also one of the settings where even bringing the word up intimacy like sets off all sorts of triggers for people.
Of course.
But the truth is, you're spending more time, energy, effort with a lot of people at the work. And so the question is, why wouldn't you inspect the quality of the relationship there?
Did you hear that, everybody in the audience?
And this is probably we don't have all the answers, but this is an ongoing conversation, I think, as a humanity we're trying to figure out.
Oh, absolutely. And hence why we have chosen polarization over community. In closing, I can't believe time has flown by with you. I can't believe...
I could spend way more time with you.
Way more time, for sure. We haven't even covered all the case studies, so sorry about that, Mike. What do you hope for the future of founders to experience in terms of being able to start a company and have a greater sense of ease?
Yeah, I mean, it's twofold. I definitely want them to be able to crush like kind of just the hard basics of like maximize the probability and crush the outcomes as a company, which is the impact to their customers at scale, revenue, maybe an exit, maybe going public, depending on where they want. But that's kind of my professional duty, which I'm very passionate about as my role. But between human to human, inside of me, I'm always tracking like what does success for your life look like as you change and evolve, because every time you achieve new goals, you're not the same person as you were before. And so one thing I try and catch myself often, and I ask myself often, is don't presuppose the person you met is the person in front of you today, whether that's days apart from when you met, months, weeks, years. I always try to come in with a new slate, as if this being is a continual evolution, and let's not bring like past baggage, right? Or presuppositions. And then I kind of want to always get a sense of, hey, what's the next thing for them? What's their next adventure? Is it another company? Is it mentoring? Is it like taking a sabbatical because all you've known in life is working? Yeah. And maybe the most fearful thing you can do is not work because you've already achieved a lot, right? And so what I want for them is to understand, that hopefully in our time together, we've co-developed, and they've developed their own internal capacity to learn and explore new aspects of being human that enrich their experience. And that's me on the inside. To their investors, to their customers, to their team, it's how can we move the needle?
Yeah.
But so I hold this dichotomy where like I just want the best for the person. I acknowledge that there's difficulties, and I also want the best for their company and the vision, which is where they're investing most of their time, energy, and effort right now.
I love this so much. When you said fear of not working because they achieved so much, when you just said that, I immediately went to my father.
Right.
My father is 83 and he is looking for a job. He wants to keep working. And I'm just like, wow. Now, I don't know what's behind that. I don't need to know what's behind that, but that really landed for me. So thank you for saying that, and thank you for dropping so many truths, so many gems in this conversation. Holy moly. It has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
I'm glad. Thank you for the opportunity. I think I'm equally as grateful for this opportunity. One of the things I've committed to is getting more out there on shows such as yourself or broadcasts where I can share a lot of my journey and what I've learned, because I've been so in the weeds tinkering because it's what I love that, I haven't actually taken a breath until this year to step out and look back and kind of journal even.
Yeah.
And codify some of the things that I've gone through. So the exchange has been equally as rewarding. Thank you to you and your team.
Thank you so much, Jon.